Covering Ontario's decision to place Toronto and Peel region under lockdown with COVID cases climbing. The city of Brampton is part of Peel, and its mayor's Patrick Brown, who previously had told us his city was dealing with a, quote, economic tidal wave. And Mayor Brown joining us this morning. Nice to have you back with us. And we know lockdowns are not ideal. They are imperfect. And you have often addressed that particular issue by highlighting where most of your COVID cases have been in the city of Brampton. Maybe you can elaborate on that particular issue, Mayor Brown.
It's heartbreaking because I have small businesses calling me on the verge of economic collapse. And this isn't just a health pandemic, it's an economic tidal wave. And I look at the latest restrictions, I know we're going to lose some businesses. I know it's going to sting. And I look at my city, I look at Brampton, our number one source of transmission is in industrial settings. And right now, they're not being shut down. And so, I honestly, I don't know if this is going to make the difference that provincial and federal officials believe it will make. I look at Brampton, our two largest sectors of the workforce are transportation logistics with 11,000 workers and food processing with 8,500. And it's life as normal for them. And so I just wish when it comes to lockdowns, we can be as surgical as possible. And we spent weeks, John, talking about restaurants and gyms. I haven't had a restaurant or a gym outbreak in Brampton. I really want us to focus on where the transmission's happening and then provide the resources to prevent it. So let me give you an example. In industrial settings, one of the challenges is people live in crowded living conditions. They come back home and it spreads to the entire household. If we had an isolation center, when someone tests positive, it would give them a place to safely isolate, limiting the spread. If we had sick benefits for people going into work with symptoms, they wouldn't fear losing a paycheck. Those are the type of supports that I think would make a big difference. And sadly, here we are 9 months into the pandemic, and we don't have sick benefits. We don't have an isolation center.
Right. So you've been pounding the table on this isolation center issue for some time, and I know there's a federal component to this. Can you just clarify the funding required for it and what the latest in your conversations with government officials on the possible rollout of it have been?
So Public Health Canada, through Minister Patty Haydu, funds isolation centers. They awarded Toronto one on September 11th, which has been positive for Toronto. It's not some elaborate security facilities. It's essentially a hotel that public health takes over. They'll have an HR person there or a health worker there, making sure that if you test positive and you have nowhere to safely isolate, that's a safe zone to do so for 14 days. We've been asking for this for a long time. The government has now said there'll be one coming on December 1st to Mississauga, and that will service all the Peel region. And it'll be part of a homeless shelter as well for vulnerable homeless individuals. My concern is in the northeast of Brampton, which is our largest industrial area, a lot of factory workers, if the support they need is not taking public transit 45 minutes into Mississauga. We need something local for them. We need, Brampton's one of the hardest hit cities in the country. The notion that we'd have to travel to a different municipality to get help,
right,
is a bit of a stretch. And it's one of the things that I find frustrating.
I guess what I'm hoping to clarify is, because this is not the first, you've been talking about this for a long time. So what is the response you've been getting from the government when you make the case for this and you highlight that, yes, it's nice to have these other options on the table, but that doesn't quite fit what we need?
Well, there's been two responses. The federal response is, yes, we understand this is important. We get it. And then they announced the funding for Mississauga starting December 1st. And it makes me wonder whether there was a breakdown in communication, if they can't understand that we need it in Brampton as well. In terms of the provincial government, I spoke to the Premier and the Health Minister about this. The Premier told me he would take it up with Krista Freeland and told me that we had his full support to get an isolation centre in the northeast of Brampton. He's going to push the Government of Canada to set one up there.
Okay, so
but it's a slow process.
I imagine, right? Yeah, no, I get it. So as the mayor, you have to crunch numbers. You have to look at the road ahead and try to plan and make decisions based on that. You started the conversation by saying you expect to, quote, lose some businesses. How many businesses do you think your city is set to lose given the way things are going?
Well, I'm worried, and if you look at this 28-day shutdown, there's a lot of businesses on the verge of collapse after the spring shutdown, and I worry that there's going to be more. I've seen businesses go under in Brampton already. It's not a hypothetical. I've seen businesses go bankrupt and leave. We had a major restaurant in our downtown core that left, and I believe there'll be others. Right now, it's only rumors we're hearing of people that are wondering whether they can make their finances work. So I wouldn't want to give an estimate on how many bankruptcies, but all I'd say is I believe there's going to be a number of them.
You know, I also want to talk about how we handle the lockdown itself. Obviously, there's a lot you're continuing to ask levels of government for, but now here we are, and we have to figure out life within the lockdown for this period. We just ran a report on how a lot of people were rushing out and trying to get literally stuff at the store before the lockdowns took hold. One shopper at a mall saying there was no social distancing taking place at the store that I went to. You've talked in the past about enforcement, tickets. You did some of that during the summer months. How are you going to approach that? I mean, I think people are already agitated as is. Are you going to be forced to have to get out there, ticket people if they're not following the rules in these next few weeks?
So the first goal is education. If someone's making a mistake and it's innocent, the bylaw will give them a warning. But if someone's flagrantly abusing the public health guidelines, then there can be financial consequences. I would say for the last few months, we've had a high level of compliance, but there was an incident in July when someone had a 200-person keg party, and they're facing a $100,000 fine. And so that was an example of a flagrant abuse of the public health guidelines. No one should be having a keg party during a pandemic, but if there's a barber shop who didn't realize that he was supposed to be closed, he would be given a warning before a fine is issued, because I think quite often there are some innocent mistakes.
Yeah, and before you go, Mayor Brown, just you started the conversation by talking about how your constituents have been reaching out to you, some of the business owners. What is it that you do say to them, given the circumstances? What is the response that you give them?
Well, I tell them anything municipally we can do to help make life easier, we'll do. Deferring property taxes, making sure payments are made as fast as possible on city contracts. But at the end of the day, what I tell them is I'll do my best to go to bat for them at the provincial table, because these closures are provincially mandated. And honestly, I have a tough time explaining to a small retail store in our downtown that has 3 or 4 people in it why they have to be closed, and a Walmart or a Costco that sells the same goods with 1,000 people are able to be open. It's tough to explain to small businesses right now what they're going through.
All right, Mayor Brown, thanks as always for the update. We do appreciate it, and we'll watch how things play out. That's Patrick Brown, who's the mayor of Brampton.